Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the often misunderstood sensory experiences of people on the autism spectrum. It's a world where the volume of life can be turned all the way up to max, or sometimes it can be almost completely silent.
This is the central paradox we're going to unpack. It seems like a total contradiction, right? But it points to a fundamental difference in how the brain processes sensory information. Okay, let's get into it. So here's our roadmap. We'll start by getting a handle on what sensory processing even is. Then we'll look at the two extremes of sensitivity. We're going to explore how this impacts daily life, especially with food, touch on strategies that can make a real difference, and then finish up by looking at the big picture of building a truly inclusive world. All right, so let's start with the basics. What are we actually talking about when we use the term sensory processing? Think of it like your brain's air traffic controller. It takes in all this information from your senses, touch, sound, sight, you name it, and it organizes everything so you can make sense of the world and react to it. It's a process most of us don't even notice is happening. And here's the key difference. For many autistic people, that filter might let in way too much information, causing overload, or it might let in too little, making them seek out more input. It's so important to remember this isn't a choice, it's a neurological difference. This brings us to the two key concepts you really need to know: hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity. They're like two sides of the same sensory coin. So you've got hypersensitivity, where a common sound can feel deafening. And then you have hyposensitivity, where someone might not even register the pain from a cut. And get this, the very same person can experience both, just for different senses. This is where these concepts get really real. For touch, think about how a tag on a shirt can be unbearable for a hypersensitive person, while someone who's hyposensitive might actively seek out the pressure of a weighted blanket. With hearing, that blender can be a source of panic for one person, while another might need the TV volume cranked up just to process the sound. This comment from a mother is just so powerful. It perfectly illustrates hyposensitivity to pain. It's not that her son is tough. His brain is literally processing that sensation in a completely different, and for many of us, an unimaginable way. Now let's look at how these sensory differences play out in a very common and often very challenging arena: the dinner table. This account from a research study with parents is something so many families will recognize. Food selectivity isn't about being a picky eater. It's often a direct result of sensory processing. The texture, the smell, and the look of food can be intensely overwhelming. The research shows a clear pattern. The preference for ultra-processed foods, for example, often comes down to consistency. A specific brand of chips will always have the same texture and taste, which is predictable and safe in a sensorily unpredictable world. And this number is telling. In one study, over a quarter of all feeding difficulties reported by parents were specifically about food refusal. This isn't a minor problem. It's a huge source of stress and can lead to nutritional concerns. So, we've laid out the challenges. Now let's talk about what can be done. The great news is there are effective strategies and therapies that can provide meaningful support. A team approach is often key. Occupational therapy is central for sensory issues, while feeding therapy and speech therapy can target specific challenges with the act of eating, chewing, and swallowing. What's so effective about occupational therapy with a sensory integration approach is that it doesn't just treat the behavior. It goes deeper to the root cause, helping the individual's nervous system learn to manage and respond to sensory input in a more regulated way. And this shows that providing support isn't just a job for therapists. We can all make a difference. Simple adaptations like allowing sunglasses indoors to cope with bright lights or creating a quiet corner can prevent sensory overload and make public and private spaces so much more accessible. This brings us to our final and perhaps most important point. This is about changing the way we think about these differences. We need to stop judging the behavior and instead understand the neurology behind it. A sensory overload meltdown is not a tantrum. It's an involuntary response to the brain being overwhelmed. That shift in perspective is everything. The neurodiversity movement, symbolized by this rainbow infinity sign, champions this very idea.
It reframes autism and other neurological differences not as deficits to be cured, but as natural variations of the human genome to be understood and respected. At the end of the day, this is why it matters. When we understand, we can validate. We can say, I see this is hard for you, let's find a way to make it better. That validation is a powerful act of inclusion and support. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. Instead of asking individuals to change their fundamental wiring to fit our world, what if we put more energy into adapting our world to fit the many diverse ways people experience it? Thanks for joining this explainer.